everybody. Welcome back to the Den of Sin. I am Devin, and I've got my cohort James here with me to deep dive into more revenge films here. Another part 2 for us. How you doing today, James?
I'm doing good. Ready to talk about movies like always. Just enjoying the sort of cooler Texas weather. Sort of. It's still not cold, but colder than it was. So.
Well, it's got to be closer to a white Christmas than California was, right?
I mean, the first 2 winters I was here was actually super cold. I remember on Christmas Day, the first year I was here, it was like 40 degrees and super rainy hard. It even hailed a little bit because it's Texas. But now this week it's been all like 70s and high 60s. So nothing to get excited about. No white Christmases here. So okay. I know it's like back in Orange County, California, but probably about the same, I'm assuming.
I don't know. In Orange County, we're just not going outside right now. It doesn't really matter what the weather is. We're just not going outside right now. It's a little bit of a rough time this Christmas in Southern California. Hopefully, we see through the end of it. I'm sure we will.
Yes.
But there are little things that bring us Christmas joy, and one of those things was actually a card from your family in my mailbox today.
Oh, good. I'm glad you guys got it.
Yeah, it looked like you had drawn the image of your family yourself. It was a sweet little picture of you and your wife and your son and your beautiful new cat. All
that's right. My son holding my cat, which is the exact that's how it is 24/7. So yeah, I used to do a little caricature, a little cartoon Christmas cards, but I'd sort of fallen it off in the last few years. To the point I didn't realize how long it had been, but then my mother-in-law collects them, and she says we hadn't done one since 2016, and I was like, oh, damn, really? It's been that long? So anyways, but yeah, so I'm glad you liked it, though, Devin.
Well, sorry, guys, I thank you again for it. I also bring it up to point out that we have a new logo on our podcast that was also designed by you. You are an incredible artist, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that was you who did the new thumbs up movie poster logo for the Den of Sin.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's up. But yeah, thank you, Devin. I appreciate that. Yeah. So that's my I like to combine my passions of art and film, so that our podcast logo is pretty fun because there's a lot of homages to some of our favorite movies in the design. So
yeah, some very cool stuff.
Some ones they specifically put in there for you specifically. So.
I noticed them for sure. And our buddy Casey just sent us both a text saying that he sent us some voltage VHS lamps. So I want to say thank you to Casey. And since I can't return the favor right now, I'm going to give him a shout out here.
That's right.
Check out Voltage VHS. You've heard us talk about it on a couple of episodes now, but voltagevhs.com. If you head there or check them out on Instagram, kind of pick up some. It's probably a little too late for a Christmas present, but people can do New Year's presents, right? That's a thing.
That's right. And there's no time frame for giving presents, I feel. So give presents 365 days a year. Make somebody happy, right? Make yourself happy. Buy one for yourself. I have mine sitting next to me at all times, so I'm excited to get another one. So
which one do you have? What movie did you get?
So I have 2. So I got one of the pros because I designed the logo for the company. So they gave me a care package. So one of them is it has their logo. So it's the VHS voltage lamp logo I designed. And then the other one is, Casey knows, one of my favorite movies of all time is Phantasm. So I do have a Phantasm one as well.
Ah, yes, Phantasm. You and I snuck out. I think it was the last thing we ever saw in a theater together before you hightailed.
Was it the last one that we saw?
I'm pretty sure we went and saw Phantasm at the Frida in Santa Ana,
That's
California.
Right. Yeah. The when J.J. Abrams did the special edition. I don't know.
It was a remaster. It was a 4K.
The remaster, but yeah, the beautiful remaster of it. So, but yeah, that was fun times. I can't believe that was the last one, but that was a long time ago.
It's going out on a high note, though, and I'm sure there'll be others. We will see another movie in the theater.
Let's hope.
And now that we've finished, we've gotten being warm-hearted out of the way, maybe let's plunge into some of the darker depths of humanity with part 2 of our revenge films. This should be at least slightly more lighthearted of a discussion because we got some of the more hardcore aspects of the revenge film taken care of last time. Was there anything you wanted to start with this week, or?
Well, so I originally when I was talking about, like, I had like a lot of the ones that are like considered the classics, so the really well known, the more the exploitation end of the, revenge film subgenre, or it's hard to even call it a genre since revenge is such a plot point for so many films, which we talked about on the part one.
I think it's a subgenre, and to clarify for anyone that didn't catch volume 1 of our revenge epic here, we are going off of revenge movies. To us, our definition is it's simply a movie about revenge. Revenge can't be a subplot or something that's achieved halfway through or anything like that. These are movies about revenge, and all the subplots bolster that revenge plotline.
Right. I guess I'll start one that I find interesting because it's so in 2008, I believe 2007, 2008, post Saw success, director James Wan, who's gone on to great success now with the Conjuring franchise and everything. He made what is very much kind of a love letter to the 70s sort of Death Wish revenge films, the kind of like hardcore, hyper violent, but it's a weird movie. But it was this movie called Death Sentence with Kevin Bacon as the lead, which at the time, early 2000s or about 2007, like I said, 13, 14 years ago, Kevin Bacon wasn't an action star, or that wasn't really what he was doing. And he's playing very much against type. And, in the film, so the story is, he plays basically, he's a risk assessor, he has this, cush corporate job.
He's a risk assessor for an insurance company.
Correct. Yeah. And, he's got these 2 kids. He's got basically like, he's got the perfect family, beautiful wife and 2 sons. And his oldest son is kind of like he's a star athlete. He's a hockey player. He's sort of the golden child. Anyway, he's living a very cush, comfortable, safe life. And they go to stop at this gas station at night, and these criminals run in, and basically his son gets killed. And it comes to find out it wasn't even like a robbery gone wrong. It was actually a gang initiation. His son's killer was he had to basically kill somebody that night to join the gang. So anyways, I'm not going to go into the whole plot of the movie, but it's basically very much the one thing I find so fascinating about it. One is it's not a super well-known movie, especially James Wan's more known. Even like this same year, he did this movie called Dead Silence, which is all about all kinds of things. But it's known because it's got like a killer ventriloquist doll in it, which is very much a James Wan thing. But but this movie is very much not in it's not well known among his films. But I think it's one of his more accomplished for a couple of reasons. Number one, what I find interesting is the guy who wrote the book that the Death Wish film, the first Death Wish film, is based off of.
Garfield. Is it Brian Garfield?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Something like that, yes. He's actually a big fan of this movie. He thought it's actually a better movie than Death Wish, and actually more in line with what the point of his novel was. As we've talked about before, I think on this podcast, about how the novel that Death Wish is based off of and Death Wish are almost politically opposed from each other.
Yes, there's a couple of these. It'll come up again on another one in particular that I'm thinking of, but I looked into this one too. And good call on bringing this one up, by the way. This is a fantastic movie that I only discovered somewhat recently.
Yeah, and I watched it when it came out because, again, like, this is a subgenre that I'm always like a sucker for and stuff. And, especially these kind of action revenge films where the lead does sort of play against type. We have a movie coming up called Nobody, starring, of all people, Bob fucking Odenkirk, playing a John Wick type character.
I even got my wife to admit that trailer looked cool.
Fucking Bob Odenkirk, what a career! Like, that guy's had a weird third act. It's crazy. God bless Bob Odenkirk. That's a whole other conversation. But anyways, so I'm kind of a sucker for those films, the films that sort of either cast somebody who is, like, again, playing his type, or is either later in their career sort of becoming, an action star or whatever. But regardless, the movie itself is interesting. One, it's definitely an update aesthetically from the 70s. It's not trying to it's very much, it's very cringy in its own right, because, these dudes are rocking around with like tribal tattoos and, and soul patches. And it's real, really gross, eye-rolly, early 2000s, like cliche bad guy stuff. But at the same time, that was it, I'd rather that at the time. I'd rather it be true to its own period than trying to be like, another film set in the 70s and just not pulling that off.
Yeah, this definitely felt, you could feel the tribute, especially to Taxi Driver, obviously Death Wish.
Yes.
To the extent that when this movie came out in 2007, the reason I didn't see it when it first came out, despite the fact that I love revenge movies and I love me some Kevin Bacon, is because I kept on thinking, why wouldn't they just call this Death Wish? Why wouldn't it looks like a remake? I had no clue that it was actually based on a book by the writer of Death Wish.
Yeah.
And that there was a purpose for all of this. And I'm glad I rediscovered it later. But it doesn't go for the aesthetic tribute, but it definitely goes for the tone.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that's what I like about it, is it balances, it's definitely an homage to that era, but with kind of updated, like it's definitely got like a hyper real, almost like a very theatrical style, like action sequences. But the other thing that it does, and it's why I think it's one of Wan's more accomplished films, is that the violence is very awkward and very real and very like clumsy. Like it's not fucking, the one thing about Paul Kersey, as much as I love, as I'm a big fan of the Death Wish franchise, Paul Kersey is a fucking architect who just turns into fucking Rambo, like immediately. And he's just like this badass killer. Kevin Bacon is, he's fumbly and what's getting him through is pure adrenaline and rage and anger. And again, it really proves the futility of violence and and again, you still watch it, you still live vicariously through him as he's like killing these really terrible gang members. But the movie just says, like, look, you could have been, like, the law system's not perfect. The justice system is flawed because it's the best we have. Like, and he could have lived with taking it to trial and putting the kid away for 5 to 10 years. Which, as a parent losing a kid, you don't think that's enough. But so instead, he decides, I'm going to fucking take the law into my own hands, and then he loses everything because of it. And the thing is,
it's not like he loses everything and the audience knows he lost everything. No, this is a movie about a guy who almost immediately regrets his vengeful actions.
Yep. And just immediately blows up in his face.
Yeah, big time.
And it's got, the cast is all good. The kid that plays his younger son is so good. The kid breaks my heart in the movie when he's in it.
Yeah.
But like John Goodman is in it he's kind of a cameo or and he's fucking amazing. Like, he's definitely playing the opposite of what John Goodman roles usually are.
It's one of his weirdest roles ever, and that's saying something for John Goodman.
Exactly, with the Coen brothers au revoir among his films anyways. But yeah, it's just a great, it's not, I'm not going to say it's a great movie in the realm of like classically great movie, but it's definitely, if you like revenge films, it's definitely worth seeing because it's doing something a little differently and it's doing it well. Like I said, I feel like James Wan is a good director. I think he knows what he does well, and I think he's capitalized on that. And he makes populist horror films, which I don't have anything against. Like good, man. Like The First Conjuring is a great movie. I don't care what anybody says. The First Conjuring is a great movie. He is a talent. He's got a great eye, and he's a talented guy. But I think this one is definitely his most. It's definitely different among his films. I'll say that his filmography is very much dictated by a specific style and genre, and so this one sort of sticks out like a sore thumb, but in a good way. So, but yeah, and then it just felt like I wanted to bring that one up because again, it is kind of a bookend to like the ones we talked about previously, more of the 70s and early 80s sort of revenge films. This was a modern, relatively modern. I always forget how long. Like to me, when people say the year 2000, that still seems current. Right, I'm an old man, but.
I couldn't believe it was 2007 that this movie was made. I was just like, no, that was just like 2 or 3 years ago when I was watching the ad for this and saying, this should be Death Wish.
No. I mean, we can talk about the Death Wish remake if you want.
I never saw it. I will confess this. As an exercise on paper, I would say that if they were going to remake Death Wish, seeing that it's an Eli Roth film starring Bruce Willis actually seems like a step in the right direction, but I kind of let other people test the waters, and based on what the reception was, there's just not much of a point to remaking a movie like Death Wish now.
And it was real, like, I don't know, it was too wink and a nod for me. It was too being like, hey, we're making Death Wish, we're remaking Death Wish, wink. Like, there's some cool violence and there's some cool action sequences, but a lot of the action too is so like far-fetched. But there's some cool like I mean, Eli Roth, again, he's a stylist more than definitely styled over substances as far as I'm concerned. But his style is good. He's got a good eye, and he understands what certain movie audiences want, which is like the gore and the violence, and that aspect of it was good. But overall, it was just sort of like, I don't know, it's very unnecessary, and it didn't like. First off, part of the appeal, especially for me, but I'm assuming for the people, is this urban settings of the 70s were far more dangerous. I mean, we talk about New York specifically, but Chicago, all those places have now been sanitized. Those downtown.
Well, we just live in a different patches of Chicago.
But Yeah, but not in the. I mean,
we don't live in the Death Wish universe anymore, and that's really why so many of these movies were made back then, and why movies like Death Sentence work out better for the modern era, because there is more of an exploration of the vengeance itself rather than an exploration of the violence that started the vengeance.
Yes,
which I think is a very 70s thing. There's a couple of them on this list of mine, more contemporary ones that are really. I know this almost breaks the rule where I said a revenge movie is about revenge, but there are several movies on this list where one person gets revenge, then someone else gets revenge, and then someone else gets revenge, and it's just a spiral of revenge. And I say that still counts because that's still a plot about revenge.
All right. Well, now I'm curious. Why don't you talk about what do you want to talk about? What's a film that you're?
If we're going to roll off of that, there was one that I saw recently called Blue Ruin. Did you ever see Blue Ruin?
The British film?
No, I think you might be thinking Dead Man's Shoes.
No, I do know Dead Man's Shoes, but I think we talked about it briefly. I did. I actually own Blue Ruin, believe it or not. I know that I can picture the cover immediately. I think I saw Blue Ruin and then Rites of Spring or some other movie around the same time, which was a British film. Blue Ruin is about the guy and his best friend, or
there is a friend in it, but it's was made just a couple of years ago. This is the film that was made just before the same guy made The Green Room, which I can't remember the name of the director. I'm sorry. I probably have.
Yes, that's for The Green Room is great.
So yeah, he went from Blue Ruin to Green Room, and some people have claimed that there's a tie between those two things. I don't think there really is. I don't see how Blue Ruin could tie to anything else. It shares some of the same DNA as Death Sentence, in the sense that it is somewhat about that vengeance spiral. But the main character, played by a guy named Macon Blair, who actually does a fantastic job of this. It starts off with this guy. He's on the beach in Delaware. He's sleeping in a beat-up old blue car, which is the Blue Ruin of the title. And he's looking, completely homeless. He's got the full homeless beard and everything like that. And he gets a knock on his window from a cop, and you think the cop's going to arrest him or whatever. But the cop actually takes him back. They seem friendly. And the cop takes him back to the station, says, "We're holding you for a day or so because the guy who murdered your parents has just been released from prison, and we don't want you to get in trouble." So it seems like this guy is dealing with the death of his parents by beach bumming it in their old car. In fact, you can see bullet holes in the car as the movie starts, and the director has confirmed that those are bullet holes from that incident. But he gets out of jail, and he goes on a little road trip for some vengeance. He goes back and he finds the guy who's in the middle of like a celebration for being out of jail, and he kills the guy. And again, it's like Death Sentence. It's very clumsy and awkward. It actually takes him a couple of times to get this guy down. And then he goes to visit his sister, who hasn't seen him also since the parents' death. And the sister has like her own family now and has a couple of kids. And he goes back and visits her just to give her a heads up. Hey, just to let you know, I killed the guy. And at this point, he's shaved and he's trying to look normal, but there's still something off about him. And the sister starts talking about how this wasn't on, she didn't hear about it on the news or anything, that this guy had been murdered as he came out of jail. And it dawns on our lead character, oh my God, they didn't call the police. They're coming after you. So he gets his sister out of there and sets himself up in his sister's house. And one thing leads to another. I'm not going to give the play-by-play for the whole movie, but it really does become this like cycle of vengeance once again, where he's going after this family that has now lost one of theirs for one of his. And they're both trying to even the score, and both of them are being stupid and awkward about it. But it's handled in such a way that it might be the most realistic one on this list. It felt like how I would see this playing out. It wasn't super cool. It wasn't walking in slow motion with a big gun. It was awkward. It was leaving keys at the scene of the crime, to your car, getaway car, things like that. Things that I think would happen to somebody who is that stressed out. So if you ever get a chance, anybody, Blue Ruin, it is streaming right now. I think I saw it on Netflix, maybe Amazon Prime, but definitely worth your time. It's a great character study on this guy and how he deals with the vengeance, just kind of almost sitting there on pause in his blue car until he gets the word that this guy's been let out of jail.
He's a kind of a dumpy, curly-haired, beardy guy, the star. Not dumpy, but like an...
Well, he starts off that way. He's just a normal dude.
Yeah.
And it actually has some cameos by child actors. It's not really cameos, just these guys got parts in this movie. But it's not people you would expect necessarily. His goofy buddy who ends up being his gun connection is played by the big brother with the spider in Home Alone.
B starts with a B. What's his your girlfriend? God damn, that's gonna bug me. My son's favorite movie. Buzz.
Really?
Buzz.
Buzz. Yeah, yes, it is Buzz.
Yeah. Woof. That's right. That's great. Yeah. In fact,
Buzz is in it, and then he's the big hick connection who's got a shitload of guns and is willing to help out his buddy and look the other way.
There was a time about, was that 2012, 2013 ish, around there when that movie came out?
Probably, yeah, about that.
But yeah, there was at one point a lot of these films were coming out, these American indie films that instead of being about traditional just whatever normal sort of Golden Globe winning kind of fare American indie, you know what I mean? Just sort of dramas about loss and love and stuff. There were American indie movies that were coming out, but they were trying to deal with more sort of an American indie film version of a crime movie, or there's all these examples in my brain that I can remember seeing around the same time, but I don't know where that point was going. But yeah, the thing is, one of the things is when we were doing this in the part 1, part 2, the part 2 for me was saved for movies I feel I hate to use this term, but a little more elevated than say the Death Wish and I will definitely say more elevated than the Thriller, The Cool Picture. But I think if you're talking about revenge, one of the ones that's more than a revenge film, but that's definitely what it's about, but it's also made a little more masterfully is Sam Peckinpah's Straw Dogs.
Yes.
Because that's a movie it's in probably still in my top 20 of all time. But it's such a hard movie to watch.
It is. It's rough.
Yeah, and it's there's an emasculation in that movie, and that's very real hard to stomach, and everything about it seems there's a poetry to it. I think 2011, whenever there's a remake of it with James Marsden and James Marsden.
Marsden, yeah.
And it's the best looking Skarsgård brother, the one from True Blood. Why I'm blank.
I don't know which Skarsgård is the better looking Skarsgård. Alexander,
whatever, the tall.
I know all their faces. I don't know any of their names. I think that's the problem.
My wife is a big fan of the True Blood. I think his name's Alexander Skarsgård, but he plays the villain in it. And it's not a bad remake, but it's definitely, it's an inferior film, and they choose to change a few things. But the original has this weird, almost dreamlike quality to it, and there's definitely a weird poetic, especially for Sam Peckinpah.
Yeah.
But it's real hard to watch, and it's real ugly. And once the sort of revenge elements kick in, the violence there is very, not that it's more realistic, but it's just uglier than the feeling of it. It's uglier. But Dustin Hoffman, it's hard now with everything come to light in the last few years of the Me Too movement and stuff, kind of being a Dustin Hoffman fan. But I spent my 20s and early 30s obsessed with Dustin Hoffman. He literally could do no wrong. He's still one of the greatest American actors ever, but apparently he's not the best human being. But who is, I guess. But
I think most of us are better than Dustin Hoffman. Let's hope. But
right, exactly, yeah. Amen. But it's definitely a thing. He was perfect for that role because he plays that emasculated sort of
bookwormy college professor type.
Yeah, intellectual, not a physical kind of character.
Up against English blue collar fucking
or roughneck,
roughneck footballers, and
yeah, exactly, football hooligan type, working class dudes, but it's real. It's so ugly, and I remember the first time I wrarely get affected by movies where a movie bothers me enough that I'm still thinking about it for days, where I'm oh God, just where it gets under your skin, and that movie is one of them where it just everything is played and it's hard because again, films that have a rape element are all. If you're a fucking decent human being, that should bother you anyways. You should, none of those sequences should, you shouldn't find them exciting. I don't know. Let's not even get into that end of the spectrum, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But this one is for me particularly because there's the way that Peckinpah balances between these characters where it's it's so hard to sit through, and it affects everybody. And you put yourself as a man because again, not to genderize film experience, but I'm sure we're human beings and we're always going to see things from our own point of views, or relate more to different characters or more characters' point of views. But as a dude watching that, it was real uncomfortable. But again, then when the revenge kicks in, the violence really comes to be, yeah, you're like, fucking get these motherfuckers. But at the same time, it's not the same cathartic experience like it is, like, say, in Death Wish. It's still pretty soul crushing, but it's still, I mean, it's a fucking masterpiece of a film. It's still, I think on the same weekend I saw Straw Dogs, I saw the original Lolita, and I think I saw Terrence Malick's Badlands. I think I saw all three of those in the same weekend.
God, that's a rough fucking weekend, dude.
I know, but Jesus, dude, like some of the greatest movies ever made. Fucking Badlands. I can talk about that shit all day too. But yeah, it was like exactly like it was like afterward, just like, I mean, great movies, but not a fun ride. But yeah, it's just one of those movies I feel like, yes, it is a revenge. I mean, that's literally the plot of it. I mean, it's a rape revenge film and really at the core of it, but just done in a way that's far more, I mean, it's fucking Sam Peckinpah, for God's sakes.
It's actually a little bit of an outlier in the sense that most rape revenge movies involve the woman as the vengeful figure. And this is a wronged husband who has also been coming up against these guys. I mean, these guys have a whole stack of offenses, including killing his cat.
That's right.
Leading up to all of this. So it's very Sam Peckinpah to victimize the husband in that scenario. Let me just say that.
Yes, that's very true.
Sam Peckinpah made everything from a dude's perspective, and that's why he's always going to be controversial and divisive. But understanding what he was about, it really does kind of illuminate this movie, and it you may not agree with the philosophy by the end, but you agree that it was a fantastically done movie. Absolutely brutal. Like you said, Hoffman's fantastic. Actually, there's another Home Alone connection here because the set designer of Home Alone said that he set up the McAllister house for the end sequence to basically be Straw Dogs for kids.
Yeah, I can totally see that. The one thing, though, to the point of like Peckinpah doing it, from a man's perspective. First off, I think that's like, as a man, like, especially, I think there's I don't know, this is a whole can of worms you can open, but I feel like it's probably a more honest film because if Sam Peckinpah tried to make a film from the perspective of a woman, especially a rape victim woman, I don't know if he'd handle it. Or there's something about we can say these days about ownership of like experience and like who, like the kind of filmmakers were telling certain kinds of stories. And he's making first off, I think he is making a point. I mean, part of it, I mean, we could argue about the legitimacy of using rape as a plot point for anything, but his thing is like, as a man, he's making a statement about emasculation, about how, like, especially in the 70s, especially at that point when, we were moving into the men's, the men cry too kind of, philosophy and like the sensification. Yeah. So he's making a point about that and how, like, you, as a man, you're still supposed to be seen as the protector. You're supposed to protect your loved ones and stuff. And the emasculation that would follow something like that, which is an interesting thing because, again, we can, I'm glad that as you and I get older, we do see the lines between gender be more blurred, and we're sort of like taking a step back and reassigning, reassessing, even more than reassigning, but we're reassessing what it means to be, a certain gender, and all of this is a fabrication. That there's, we've imagined, like, gender is something that human beings came up with, and all this, which is all great, but I still think it's, especially at the time, I think it's a valid, it's a valid topic to sort of explore because, again, as a man, especially Sam Peckinpah's age at the time and what he lived through, like, it at one point meant something to be a man. Like, it meant something to be a masculine man. And for good or for bad, like, as a man, you carry that with you because of society, whether you want to or not. And that's sort of, that's not who Dustin Hoffman's character is challenged because, that's not who he is as a person. That's not who he is. He's a thinking, he's led his life in a different way. But then you have all these, like, guys who have sort of entrenched in that, especially that, blue collar, but, this is what it means to be a man. You take what you want, all that shit. So it's just an interesting topic. And, like, it is. It was
even marketed interesting along that philosophy too, because there's the old saying, you wouldn't hit a man with glasses. And the cover, the poster for Straw Dogs is a extreme close-up of Dustin Hoffman's face with his glasses broken.
Broken Looking Glass. One of my favorite posters art. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, it's definitely. I feel like it's not one. I think of like when I was looking at lists of different. I don't think it came up too often because I don't think it's one people consider like. Even though that's literally the whole crux of the film. Like, but
well, there's such a buildup. I mean, the revenge stuff. It doesn't get violent until like the last third of the movie.
Yeah,
and typically with the revenge film, you're used to something happening towards the beginning,
end of the first act. Yeah,
and it is rare that revenge really comes towards the. I mean, I think that's the reason why a movie like Carrie would be disqualified from this list, even though there's really no other plot to Carrie outside of these girls are being mean to Carrie and eventually they'll pay.
Yeah,
I don't think of Carrie as a revenge film because it's really similar to what I said about Taxi Driver last time. It really kind of exists almost in a genre of its own. It's not like anything else, even in the horror genre. But while we're on Sam Peckinpah, I think that is well. It's a fairly good way to jump into Western revenge because Sam Peckinpah was known for Westerns. I may be misleading you a little bit because I actually don't have another Sam Peckinpah. Like Straw Dogs is the only Peckinpah on my list. But I do think it's worth mentioning the Westerns that have used this as a plot device because there are so many of them. And especially if you get into spaghetti Westerns, at a certain point I had to just stop even researching spaghetti Westerns with a revenge subplot or revenge plot.
You know, when you said Sam Peckinpah, that's what I was like. I was sort of waiting for you to talk about Westerns because that is definitely your far more knowledgeable about the Westerns. But yes, one thing I had, and I think we even talked about it, is like Westerns are such an interesting genre because most of those films revolve around some sort of. I mean, I guess that's kind of all film if I think about it, but like some wrong that needs to be righted. So there's always some plot that is about. Whether it's revenge or if it's justice, but it's the crux of most because it's the whole idea of the Western is it was a lawless time. It was before Western culture and Western society in the United States like sort of finding its footing and really coming into a civilized law and order type of we're above this now but it's very much a rape and pillage, kind of time in history. A lot of violence in the Manifest Destiny and all that crazy shit. But that's why Westerns are such
a lot of these gender roles that you're talking about, which aren't necessarily an American thing. I mean, there was a lot of this going on all across the world. But I think in terms of American masculinity, so much of it comes from the legends of the Old West, which were, if we were to really research the truth, were oftentimes everything but legendary. You mentioned Unforgiven in our last episode, and we talked a little bit about why Unforgiven wasn't technically a revenge film because he was revenge for hire, and then in the last act he gets his own revenge for something that happens along the way.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen High Plains Drifter?
No. It's funny that you asked that because of this podcast, I was making a list. In fact, one random thing I just have to say is I was listening to a Dean Martin playlist, and then the song "My Rifle, My Pony, and Me" came up.
Classic.
And I was like, I've never seen a Dean Martin Western, and I was making a list of all the Westerns I've seen and all the ones yeah, there is. Yeah, so I have a whole list of Westerns I need to see because I feel like that's still Western films and war movies far more than Westerns because I've seen pretty much every modern Western, any Western post 1995 I probably have seen, but all of the classic Westerns, there's tons that I haven't. Like all the Jimmy Stewart Westerns, I've probably only seen one. I've seen a lot of. I mean, I've seen the most of like the Man with No Name films, the all of the Eastwood films, but there's a ton of good Westerns I haven't seen. So,
well, High Plains Drifter needs to go towards the top of your list. It's on there. There's. This is saying something. This is one of Clint Eastwood's lesser woke films. It's to me, I think it makes a good pairing with Unforgiven because I feel like Unforgiven is even more than The Man with No Name and some of the more notorious Eastwood characters. I think that William Money, the character he played in Unforgiven, was the older version of the guy in High Plains Drifter. He rides into town and he is just horrible. He's just a monster. And because he's Clint Eastwood, he's the good guy in this story because there's going to be revenge against someone who's even worse than him. But it's about a small town called Lago. It's a beautiful little town with like a lake view. And Eastwood rides in, and everyone, of course, has that silent moment watching the stranger ride his pale horse into the place. And the first thing that happens is a couple of guys go in to try to kill him, and he takes them down, which gets the town's attention even further. And the next thing he does, I don't really get it. I don't understand. A woman starts giving him shit in the street, calling him slime and trash. And so he just takes her into a barn and rapes her, like as if like she had it coming. And I think this was Eastwood's way of trying to show you, do not look at this guy as the hero of this story. This guy is not a hero. You start to learn a little bit more about this town and what's been going on. And they had, like a lot of these old Western towns and movies have, there's like a gang that kind of terrorizes it. They had brought these guys in initially, led by Jeffrey Lewis, Juliette Lewis's father, and a really incredible character actor himself. One of the most important characters in The Devil's Rejects. One of my favorite things he's done. Yeah. But these guys, they're supposed to be there to protect the town, but the town is so cowardly and stuck in trying to project an image of decency and justice that they do nothing to stop these guys' bad behavior, and eventually they're running the town. And they end up killing a marshal, and the town rats them out. They get caught. They go to prison, but they're about to come out. It's been like a year they've been in prison. And then this stranger rides into town, and the three guys that he takes care of at the beginning of the movie turn out to be the guys that were hired to take care of the town after the gang already went to jail. So these guys were ornery too. And Eastwood sees the problem they have. He just does not care. And they offer him the entire town. They say, you can have anything. And he decides to take full advantage of that anything. He walks into the general store, picks up a huge fistful of cigars, starts giving candy to the Native American children that are kind of being accosted in the story, like starts making this town pay for whatever it is that he thinks they've done. And you start to see flashbacks. He's having dreams and flashbacks of this killing of the marshal in this town by this gang led by Jeffrey Lewis. And you see the town, they're all watching this guy get whipped in the middle of the street, whipped to death by three men, and they do nothing. And you start to get the vibe at a certain point that Clint Eastwood is not just waiting to get revenge on Jeffrey Lewis and his gang. He's getting revenge on this town in the process while he's waiting for them to show up under the guise of looking out for them. And they never tell you who the stranger is. They make lots of comments about like, well, what's his name? What's your name? I didn't tell you. And so he's playing off the man with no name a little bit. And apparently Eastwood admits that in the original script, they do tell you exactly who this guy is, and he's a regular mortal guy. In fact, spoiler alert for anybody that doesn't want to know what the script says, he is the brother of the marshal that's killed at the beginning in the flashback. But Eastwood decided to play it differently. He excised any information that would link him to this marshal so that you're thinking either he's the resurrected spirit of the marshal possibly, or some sort of angel of vengeance that's ridden into town. Even the score is kind of spooky, and there's a couple of horror elements. They paint the whole town red and rename it Hell. It's fucking insane, this movie. So if you can get yourself past that first few minutes when Clint Eastwood comes in and you're expecting him to just be Clint Eastwood, this is a very different movie, but you'll be rewarded if you hold through it. And you do get to see this whole town starts to fall apart on each other as he's taking advantage of them to like get the whole hotel cleared out so that he can have the hotel to himself, and because he gets anything in the town. As you start to realize that he's getting revenge on the town from within at the same time as preparing for the ultimate revenge against this gang, it's just masterfully done. And it was the first Western that Clint Eastwood ever directed, and he hit it out of the park. I don't know that he ever really hit it that hard again until Unforgiven. Although I love so many of his other Westerns, Pale Rider and things like that. Outlaw Josie Wales is another one that's revenge. In fact, I have a tattoo of Outlaw.
I was going to say, that's one of the ones I thought, specifically, because that's... you see that come up on a lot of lists, and that Outlaw Josie Wales is one I've seen, but I probably saw it with you. In fact, I think the majority of westerns pre 1979 I've seen with you.
I'm surprised we never did High Plains Drifter.
Yeah, no, which now having even heard it from you, it's even more shocking because I definitely.
You've got to see it. You would enjoy it.
One Western that comes up, and I feel like it's worth mentioning because of who made it and the time frame. I won't go into it much, but is The Quick and the Dead.
Yes.
Because first off, and I haven't seen it in probably 12, 13 years, but it's a Sam Raimi Western. So, and everything that comes with that is exactly what you get.
Yep.
The characters are all like kind of stylish and a little over the top, but there's a really great intelligence. The whole crux with like Lance Henrik's character is really smart, but it's very stylish. There's so many cool Sam Raimi shots, but it's the story of a young Leonardo DiCaprio trying to get revenge in one of the most hateful fucking roles ever, which he did. He Unforgiven, and then this movie. And now all of a sudden I'm blanking on the actor's name. Gene Hackman played two of the most hateful motherfuckers in film history, like very close to each other, both in westerns. But holy shit, you want this guy to die. So it's just really rewarding. Again, it's not necessarily high art, but I really enjoy it, and it's definitely. I remember when we saw it with our friend Casey. And I was like, it felt like a comic book. It felt like a comic book. It felt like an EC Comics version of a western. Like. Yeah. Everything is a little stylized and like a little unrealistic, but in a way that's like really like fun but ultimately like it's just a revenge film. It's literally a pretty straightforward story. It's this quick draw competition.
Sharon Stone is underrated in it, I felt.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that was right around the time, and she was kind of having between that and then I don't know how much difference there was in time between that and Casino, but
a year or two at most, I would say.
Yeah. But I was like, oh yeah, Sharon Stone's actually a good actress. She's not just the pussy shot from which isn't that's what she was known for, was for indecent proposal. Jesus Christ, for
Basic Instinct.
Basic Instinct. Thank you. God, those '90s titles, all those like 2 word '90s titles. But yeah, she was great in it, and the whole cast was great. I mean, the whole cast. At the time, I think their biggest complaint was that was Leonardo DiCaprio. Do you remember when people thought he was a shitty actor? Isn't that funny?
Yeah, that is kind of funny how that turned around.
Yeah, isn't that fucking funny?
This was an early film of his. It was also a very early film of Russell Crowe and of Gary Sinise. In fact, I think it may have even been introducing Gary Sinise or Russell.
Really?
One or the other of them.
I think it was Russell Crowe because I think Sinise had been
But Sinise. It was post Forrest Gump. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But it was prior to. What's that one with Denzel that Russell Crowe did? Virtuosity.
Virtuosity, yes, there you go.
This was pre-Virtuosity. So you had Leo, Russell, and Gary Sinise, and then you had old Western chestnuts like Gene Hackman, and Lance Henriksen shows up. I mean, everybody in this movie. There's a deleted scene with Bruce Campbell, but he appears in the credits as the wedding shemp. And so for years, not knowing that this was a deleted scene, my friend and I, Greg, would try to figure out where the hell was Bruce Campbell in this story. But I think it was shit on when it came out because it was just kind of pop fun. But I think it's one that people are going to rediscover as time goes on, especially being a Western about a woman that kicks ass. I think that's something that will be seen as a forward-facing plot line, especially in the wake of things like High Plains Drifter, where women are treated pretty shitty. But this actually spins me off, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about Westerns, but this particular Western is a little different than most other Westerns of it or any era, and was also an inspiration for another revenge film that we'll be talking about very shortly, I'm sure. And that movie is Hannie Calder. You ever heard of Hannie Calder?
Never.
Was made in the early 70s. I want to say maybe 71. And it stars Raquel Welch and Robert Culp, possibly my favorite Robert Culp performance ever. And then the gang of bad guys is just about the coolest gang of bad guys I could think of putting together in 1971, which was Ernest Borgnine, Strother Martin, and Jack Elam. And Hannie is the lead character. She's a woman living with her husband, out in the wilderness, out in the desert or whatever. And this gang shows up and they kill her husband real quick. And then they take her. And it was, I don't know exactly how to compliment a rape film rape scene for how it's shot. Yeah, but this one was handled really well because this is not an exploitation picture, even though it kind of floats in some sort of weird other world that belongs to American Westerns and spaghetti Westerns. The rape scene was actually handled in a way that I thought was really artistically relevant, insanely creative, served the purpose of the story. And it wasn't like in older movies, with the Hays Code and everything in place, when people are having sex, in anything, it tends to just kind of, the camera will wander to the window, or their door will close on them, or a blanket will fold over or whatever. This wasn't trying to hide what was going on. There's no nudity, but it's all shot in such a way that you get the ugliness of it without the hanky feeling that some of the exploitation movies give you. You never feel for her violation, but you never feel like the actress Raquel Welch has been exploited in this. And I applaud it for that. And then, of course, she goes off and wants to get revenge against Borgnine and company, and finds Robert Culp. And Robert Culp is a bounty hunter with great 60s big beard and coke-rimmed glasses, and such a character. And so he takes her kind of under his wing, and once he realizes what her story is, and teaches her how to shoot, and gets her own like special gun made especially for her. And the gun maker was actually played by Christopher Lee in his first and only Western appearance ever.
Really?
Yeah, and he's fantastic. He's great. I mean, it's longer than a cameo, but it's not a huge supporting role. But if you know who Christopher Lee is, there's no mistake. I mean, if you're looking for Christopher Lee, just look for the one who's 11 feet tall.
Exactly.
But yeah, then they go after these crooks, and it's a great story. It is a female-led Western during a particular period of time. Of course, it does fall into some of the trappings. They can't have her go off with Robert Culp without at some point there being some sort of feelings between her and Robert Culp, even though her husband was just killed. But it comes upon it somewhat honestly, in the sense that Robert Culp is a fascinating enough character in this movie that you can see why a connection would bond between these two human beings. I just don't think it would be romantic. And they don't travel too far into that territory either, which makes me think maybe it was the producer's decision that these two had to hook up at some point. But Raquel Welch just kicks ass. It's probably, I would put it on a top 10 list of the most underrated American Westerns of all time.
Damn, I got to see that. I mean, it sounds incredible. And, I feel like Raquel Welch is known. I mean, she's one of the most beautiful. I mean, there's a reason that she was considered one of the biggest sex symbols for a long. But I feel like she's always been a good actress, and she's known for more being like her movie star looks or whatever. So, and again, any movie that includes a strong female like protagonist is in a Western is definitely something I think I should see. So
yeah, I'm sure Sam Raimi saw it, and I'm absolutely 100% sure that Quentin Tarantino saw it. And I think maybe we should just go ahead and get into this now, because everyone's going to be expecting it. Because Hanny Calder was actually the inspiration for the relationship between Uma Thurman and Sonny Shiba in Kill Bill. Has anybody seen Kill Bill? Does anybody know Kill Bill?
I think so. I did not know that, really. So okay. I mean, the Sonny Shiba scene is my favorite scene in the whole. It's so perfect. Everything about that sequence is. I mean, there's Quentin Tarantino is going to always occupy a very weird space for film fans because
it's true.
But dude,
I don't love to hate him. I kind of hate to love him though. Sometimes
that's it. Yeah, I'm the same way. And like as a human being, whatever. But he's nobody in the last 40 years has been able to channel their influences and their love of film like him. And the one thing I've always admired about him is he's very, very honest about the films that he borrows from and like the homages that he does. He doesn't try to hide it or say like, no, this is like, no, he's like, I love these movies. But again, he still managed like that Sonny Chiba sequence, the whole Sonny Chiba, especially the beginning sequence, when she first arrives at his sushi restaurant. It's so perfect. Like I'm not going to do any voices. But I mean, there's such no, we're not going there. But there's just such a beauty. Like there's just such a first off, if the one thing I love about it is Sonny Chiba is known, he's Sonny Chiba, he's fucking the Street Fighter. Like, but there's a weird like sweetness and a laugh. Like you just want to hug that like Hattori Hanzo, the character plays. It's so well done. But I didn't know that. That's interesting.
It is really well done. Robert Culp is just as huggable in this too. Robert Culp does a fantastic job. But Kill Bill is kind of special because this was the one. Like, I had to see it twice before I was even sure that I loved it. I was pretty sure I liked it, but I had to sit down and watch. Having them separated actually by a year, I think served against it. I wish they could have done, what does he call the full cut? The Whole Bloody Affair. Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair, which occasionally you'll catch if the world ever goes outside again at the New Beverly Theater in Hollywood, which is owned by Tarantino. He'll occasionally show the original cut, which is different than showing the two movies back to back. This is actually a cut that complements one another without having all of the cliffhanger stuff and the parts holding it together. But this really was the first time that Tarantino just went completely all out. Because if you think about it, up to this point, he had done Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and Jackie Brown, which all three, believe it or not, seem relatively constrained compared to how wild Kill Bill gets. Partly because he realized, like, wow, I can do whatever the hell I want right now. He was king of Hollywood, and whenever that was, 2003 was that when it came out? Yes, 2003 was the first Kill Bill. And it was just, the plot of it was almost just to say, oh, it's a tribute to revenge films. Uma Thurman came up with the character with him, I believe, on the set of Pulp Fiction. And there's fan theories that suggest that maybe Kill Bill is the film version of Fox Force 5, the pilot that Uma Thurman's character jokes about in Pulp Fiction.
Right.
But in reality, I don't think it's that. It may have inspired that conversation. But she has been wronged by Bill. She's getting married. I'm not going to go into almost everyone has seen this. We all know that her as the bride, Beatrix Kiddo, that she's going to go after Bill, who is her former lover and mentor, and the 5 people in his gang that used to also be her gang of assassins, and exact revenge for killing her or killing her husband. There was an unborn baby involved as well?
That's right. Yes.
And leaving her for dead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Never. Yes. I thought you said something else. An unborn baby. Correct.
Yes. Okay. So, what I thought was cool, and I have no idea if Tarantino did this intentionally, but in a way, because I watch a lot of the same movies, I consider myself a little bit of a Tarantino whisperer. I feel like he captured in each of the 5 characters a different version of revenge film. Beatrix, of course, is, the ultimate like rape revenge victim. She's very much out of, I Spit on Your Grave and the Hanny Calder and all these other things. But you've got Lucy Liu covering all the martial arts revenge. You've got Michael Madsen's character is kind of like the Old West revenge. You've got Daryl Hannah's character is like even visually a tribute to Thriller, A Cruel Picture. Eye patch. And then you've got Vivica Fox, who is a tribute to the blaxploitation revenge film like Coffee, which was also another sort of subgenre within a subgenre that we probably won't have as much time to go into. But thank goodness he got it into Kill Bill, because they're all represented. Pretty much every kind of revenge picture is represented from each of these different characters that she has to go after, giving him an excuse to make a little mini revenge film in that subgenre with each section of the movie. Brilliantly executed. It's a movie that shouldn't have worked and somehow does.
Yeah, I mean, I think the movie gets really outlandish when it becomes the like Gordon Liu, the like Shaw Brothers film, like,
yes,
because even the stuff with the Hattori Hanzo, even the stuff like the open with Vivica Fox is it's far more grounded until it becomes like a straight up. This is a term that was applied in the 70s with the chop sake, the Shaw Brothers style, over the top kung fu shit when Gordon Liu is standing on top of the sword and like all that shit. Then it gets real like, what the fuck? Because even the stuff with the Crazy 88, it's hyper stylized and hyper violent, but it has
a place in this universe.
Yeah, but then when that sequence comes, then it becomes, I think that's most stylized. That's the height of its insanity. But the one thing is that I feel like it has to be said about that movie, especially in the revenge, is it's so beautifully done because, first off, I've been watching a shit ton of low budget late 80s to late 90s like action films and all these like Andy Sedaris movies and Fred Olen Ray movies and stuff. And David Carradine keeps popping up in all these terrible movies as like either as like the main bad guy or just as like a cameo. And you're like, what the fuck, man? Because he's so good. I mean, Tarantino's sort of known for that anyways, but he's just so goddamn good in that movie. So good in that role. And the dialogue is so good. But there's this like, unlike most revenge films where the bad guy is played as truly despicable, you can see there is a genuine love between Bill and Beatrix. Like, there is a affection there for whatever, twisted reason. Like, there is a genuine affection there. And the fact that Bill basically is raised, I mean, ultimately in the most fucked up way of saying, like, he stole her daughter and he's had her this whole time. Like, there's all these layers to it. It's so nuanced for being such a cartoonish movie, which is so what Quentin Tarantino does. But I feel like it's one of my favorite. It's such a brilliant ending where, like, you sort of almost feel bad for Bill a little bit because you're like, oh, wait, are they going to reconcile?
Yeah, in a weird way, you want them to make it.
Yeah, you want them just to forgive each other, even though it's insane because he shot her on her wedding day. But it's just, as I said, that's what's the beauty of it. They're nuanced characters. And Bill, as a character, is a little bit more, he's written better than most movie villains. And then the performance from both of them is incredible. So, and it's weird because when you think, like, wait, David Carradine and Uma Thurman, what? That doesn't make a fucking lick of sense. But then when they're on screen together, you're like, oh, I totally get this. Like, and there's, like, obviously, there's all sorts of, like, mother-daughter, all sorts of, like, facets to the relationship that are sort of implied, like these like sort of surrogate father roles and stuff. But it's so well done that it's like, that's the one thing about Tarantino films, and I think especially in that film, is that it's so many things all at the same time. But ultimately, what it is, as you said, and I think we said on the first episode, it's a love letter to revenge films. It's literally what it is. He wanted to make, Lady Snowblood. He wanted to make Cough. Like, he wanted to make his version of those movies, and he did it in such a unique way. So, bravo, I say, because again, I think it did sort of popularize. First of all, again, he's sort of, people discover movies through more popular movies, and he's always been known for that. And
yeah,
like you said, I wouldn't know. I mean, I probably would have gotten around to knowing who, the film Lady Snowblood, and even like the whole, like, the pinky. Anyways, that's the whole subgenre.
The whole pinky violence subgenre.
Yes, exactly.
There's a great old box set I have for that.
Have you seen the Female Prisoner Scorpion films?
No, but I'm aware of them.
We need to discuss those movies. I just watched them for the first time recently. I have a lot to talk about. But anyways, we'll get to that. Maybe that's a future podcast. One film I did really want to, the last film I really
real quick. I wanted to, I had a couple of casting what ifs on.
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's hear it.
I think most people at this point know that David Carradine was not the first choice for Bill. And that was Warren Beatty, in which he was going to be much more of a James Bondish sort of playboy, which I think could have been interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beatty definitely entertained the theory. But have you ever known why Michael Parks plays two parts in the movie?
I think I did hear, I think I saw a documentary or whatever, interview about it, but why don't you tell me, because I don't.
Well, Michael Parks shows up in Kill Bill Volume 1 as kind of a redneck cop, and it's a character that he's played in multiple Tarantino films and also multiple Robert Rodriguez films at this point, who also has done a lot of vengeance. I don't know if we'll have time to get to Desperado or Machete, but I think we can cover that all with Kill Bill.
Yeah, exactly.
But Michael Parks shows up in another segment in Kill Bill 2, and he actually is doing brownface, but he's so bizarre.
It's so good, though, too.
He's so good. But apparently he took that part because it was supposed to be Ricardo Montalban, and Montalban couldn't make it. Montalban, of course, died a few years later. But I think that would have been his little tribute to The Wrath of Khan. Because, as we said, that was another, at least many people consider it a revenge movie. Yeah. So, of course, he would want Ricardo Montalban to be in Kill Bill.
Yeah, and it's funny because, I mean, that's a specific performance in that, which, again, there's a problematic to it because if you know Michael Parks. But again, he plays it in such a, first of all, the whole sequence is so bizarre and a little like, stomach turning with like the, what they're talking about and the but he's so fucking like he's reveling in that character. He's having so much fun as that character that you just gotta sort of accept it. But I also fucking Michael Parks. I feel like what a goddamn dude, like
one of the world's most underutilized actors.
The last movie I want to talk about specifically, going the exact opposite way of Kill Bill, is a movie that's out in the theater and doesn't automatically. I don't think it comes to mind immediately when you think about revenge films, even though that's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. It's just done in a much the movie In the Bedroom, which I think is 2007-ish. 2000
sounds about right. I never saw this one.
So it's fucking phenomenal. First off, you got Tom Wilkerson, who's one of the great actors,
speaking of underrated.
And hands down, my favorite female actor of all time, Sissy Spacek. And these are, they're playing, people in their middle age. Nick Stahl plays their son, who is like he's very smart. He is, she's a college professor. I forget what he does, but they're like, they have money, they come from a comfortable family. They're they live off the coast of Maine. They have a very comfortable life. You see them, in the twilight of their years, and, they're very much comfortable little family. But Nick Stahl falls in love with Marissa Tomei, who's an older lady who's divorced with a kid, whose husband is sort of a piece of shit, and Sissy Spacek plays the mom, and she doesn't like the relationship. She feels like Marissa Tomei is not right for him, and he's going to waste his life because he's got a promising career. But Tom Wilkerson, the dad, he kind of encourages it because Marissa Tomei is like the hot older lady, and he thinks it's just a fling. He doesn't think his son is really have that many feelings for her. He thinks it's just like he's just fucking her, basically. What ends up happening, I'm not going to give the whole story. Ends up happening is the husband, who is a piece of shit and it comes from a very affluent family in town, ends up killing Nick Stahl because he's jealous. But then, but he's rich and his family gets him off the charges of murder. So what ends up happening is that the mom and dad, the Tom Wilkerson and Sissy Spacek's characters, have to see this dude around town. They're like going down to the grocery store and they see the dude that killed their son. And one of the things that's so brilliant about the movie is how we deal with grief, how different people deal with grief, and how a lot of families are torn apart, like especially marriages, by the death of children. And like there's this brilliant fucking scene. I mean, first off, it's fucking Sissy Spacek. I think she actually, if she didn't win the Oscar for it, she was nominated for it. And I think Tom Wilkerson was nominated too.
I think both, I don't think either one, but I do remember they were both nominated.
Yeah, but Sissy Spacek there's a sequence where because she's a conductor. She's a musical conductor. I think he's a college professor and she is a conductor. And she basically has like a breakdown in the middle of like conducting. But there's this argument scene where it is one of the most uncomfortable, most real, just like, first off, it's again, like she blames him for the death of her son. And like, he's like, she's basically emasculates him. And like, there's a whole sequence where like, they're in the middle of this argument and then like this Girl Scout at the door or some like girl is selling like cookies or something. And it kind of breaks them up, their argument. So it gives them a chance to sort of, and like he gives her all this money, basically buys everything she has because he's so like, but anyways, it's from there, Tom Wilkerson can't get it out. He can't stop thinking about it. So he decides to get revenge. And I won't spoil it for anybody, but it's handled in such a mature way. And the cinematography is brilliant. There's just all these scenes. There's one scene where he's going to do it and he's basically stuck at these train tracks and you see the lights and it's really like there's like a metaphor there that's happening where it's like, this is your last chance to fucking rethink this. Like once you cross over these tracks, there's no turning back. And you see him contemplate sitting in the truck and with the music and the cinematography, it's a silent scene, there's no dialogue, but you feel like there's this weight that the scene is carrying. And it's just a brilliant fucking film. And I think the director, he was an actor, I believe. He only directed the one movie, but it's so fucking good. And again, it's amazing cast. And I think once again, what it says about revenge, even though I think ultimately you can argue one way or the other, and some people might find the ultimate point maybe a little like uncomfortable, maybe, or they may not agree with the final point of the film or what some people think is the final point of the film. But it's a really interesting film. And again, it's definitely not your Death Wish. It's definitely not your Kill Bills. It's much more of a real, honest look at like living with tragedy. And if you have the opportunity to right or wrong, will you take it? And then once you do, what do you do afterwards? And it's a fucking brilliant movie.
Yeah, I need to check that out. I'm there for the Spacek. The Wilkinson will just be a bonus at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing is, I mean, Tom Wilkinson, especially at that time, he was in a ton of stuff. He's always great. He's such a great character actor, and that's why it's nice to see him as basically the lead. But I mean, Sissy Spacek, who's it's Sissy Spacek,
yeah.
And I feel like this was her last role because again, as actors get older, and actresses especially, as women get older, it's hard. You get the fucking the Irishmans, and you get the De Niros and the older certain men who still have careers into their golden years. But for women, it's a lot harder. The roles aren't as there. And man, Sissy Spacek acts her ass off in this movie. So highest recommendation if you've never seen it.
I'll definitely check that out. There's another one that I meant to get to last time. In fact, I'm surprised we didn't get to it last time, but I think we would both hate ourselves forever if we didn't talk about this movie, and that is Rolling Thunder.
Oh, yeah. Well, so I'm glad you brought this up because the last point I wanted to make was about the subgenre of the sort of justice into like vigilante films taking justice in your own hands. I do feel like Rolling Thunder, more than the rest of them, is more of a revenge film and less a vigilante film. But it's a fucking great movie. I mean, the thing is, like, it's definitely a product of its time. I'm blanking on the actor's name.
William Devane.
He's had a long career, but not usually the dude who's carrying a movie, and definitely not like who you would first think is the guy who would be in this role, especially having Tommy Lee Jones be the co-star in the movie. That you would think he would be more of the guy, but anyways, you want to talk about it?
Well, William Devane is just amazing in this movie, and yeah, you're right. He's
amazing. He's great. He's
one of those actors. How did he never catch a break? Because he's in a Hitchcock movie. He's in this. He's pretty much there. He's even in some of the other. He was in Payback, the revenge movie we mentioned last episode. I don't know how that dude didn't have a bigger career, and I think that he actually attributes it somewhat to the way that this movie was marketed.
Because also this movie people did not enjoy this movie, or at least they didn't appreciate the movie upon its original release.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people got it. For one thing, we hadn't really gotten to the in the early 80s, you had things like Rambo that really dealt with the treatment of Vietnam vets, and this is very much that sort of thing, but well before First Blood ever came out. Dealing with the way that we treated our vets coming back from Vietnam, it was a shameful thing. And this delves into some just kind of shit luck territory too. I don't think a lot of what's happening to him is just because he was a vet. But Willem Devane,
I think it's his overall mental state is because he was a vet, that he's hanging on by a thread anyways because of what he experienced. And then
he wasn't just a vet, he was a POW.
That's exactly. Yes, you're right.
And he's coming back with Tommy Lee Jones was another fellow soldier who was a POW alongside him. So the war at this point is well over, and he's just coming home. And the town is throwing him a big party, and they give him some, token gifts. And then his house gets invaded by a couple of shitheads from the town who want to get that reward. It was like almost like
it was gold silver pieces, right? It was like it was silver dollars or something.
It's like $200 silver dollars or something.
Oh, that's right.
It was something that does not seem. I don't know how the crime escalated to this point, but a gang that is run by Roscoe P. Coltrane from Dukes of Hazzard breaks into his house, and he won't give up. They point out that Devane has been he's been going through all this trauma, but part of how he internalizes it that he no longer really feels pain. He experiences it differently than anybody else. So as he's watching his life be turned upside down, he's remaining completely calm, which seems to be pissing off the attackers even more. And they stick his hand in the garbage disposal in the sink. And apparently the scene exists. Supposedly it was an incredibly bloody scene. For the sake of our audience, it has been cut. I don't know where that scene is. It's actually relatively tame compared to most revenge films of that same era. But he loses his hand, and then right in front of him, while he's still dealing with that pain, they kill his family right in front of him. And so he tries to get some proper justice, but what it comes down to is he's just going to have to go down to Mexico and kill these guys himself. So he calls up Tommy Lee Jones to help him out. Tommy Lee Jones, who is in his charge at the POW camp and will drop everything he's doing, and literally does drop his entire life and what he's involving himself in to go and help his commanding officer exact revenge. And the revenge itself is highly stylish. It's not actually too... it feels like an exploitation movie, but it's not. The violence never gets too over the top, and it's actually handled very serious and straightforward. Part of that is because it was actually produced by 20th Century Fox, and when they saw the movie, they didn't know what to do with it, so they dumped it and ended up getting picked up by AIP, which, if anyone out there doesn't know, American International Pictures. Samuel Z. Arkoff, and these are the guys who worked with Roger Corman a lot. These were kind of gods of exploitation film. So they released the film on their circuit, and it really was a film that should have had the full-blown 20th Century Fox marketing juggernaut release. It should have been in contention for Academy Awards. Instead, nobody knew what to do with it, and it got dumped on a double bill with another exploitation movie, and the world just didn't seem to notice it for about 20 years until Quentin Tarantino named his production company after it.
Yeah, and it was definitely a movie I'd neve heard of until Tarantino cited it as one of his favorite films. I was like, oh, well, I should see this. And yeah, I mean, it's fucking... I feel like it occupies a weird space because, again, there's some ludicrous elements to it. The fact that he's running around with like his hook is definitely a very exploitation-y kind of gimmicky thing.
And the hook is just a kind of... I don't know why they did hook hands back then. They didn't have the technology to not make it look like it was a hand holding a hook. Like,
exactly.
Hook hands were always like exactly arm length with a hook.
Exactly. But it's a really, really, the acting is great. The pacing is amazing. Like you said, it's not like trying to be an exploitation movie. It's trying to be a legitimate movie. It just is, the subject matter is so exploitation-y and stuff. And
they were really filmed to be slimy in a lot of ways, too. The James Best, the guy that plays Roscoe P. Coltrane and the head of the gang in this, he wore ice underneath his cowboy hat for the entire movie so that he would just look greasy and sweaty through the whole thing. And wet. Like that sort of trick. I mean, that's really what makes these kinds of movies great. And Devane, I do legitimately think that he may have been maybe not robbed of an Oscar, I don't know who won that year, but robbed of a nomination. And in many ways robbed of a career because they didn't know how to market this.
Yeah, agreed. And again, like he's great in that lead role. He's been in a million things. He's been in a million great movies, but
his face.
Yeah,
everyone in the world knows his face.
He's always a supporting actor or just a much smaller role. But yeah, and it was definitely
originally written by Paul Schrader too, just because he has to come up and everything. Do you know what the Writers Guild meaning is with the difference when you see an ampersand in a credit versus the word spelled out A-N-D?
I know that there's one is that's co-written together. Another one is like it was written by somebody else and then somebody else rewrote it.
If there's an ampersand, it means it's a writing team. And if it just says and, it means it was written and then rewritten. Right. This was rewritten out of Schrader's hands, and he is still pretty vocal about not liking it.
I feel like, the thing is, I was going to say we need to do a Schrader episode, but I feel like we've talked about in all these episodes pretty much.
We can just make a best of episode of Den of Sin, and if you put it together, we'll make a Schrader episode.
But yeah, that subgenre of again, I keep calling them vigilante. That's really what it is. It's somebody who's killing criminals is a vigilante.
Yeah. Every revenge movie is a vigilante movie, but not every vigilante movie is a revenge movie.
Yeah, exactly. We've made that. I feel like we've made that distinction ourselves, and if other people don't agree with it, they can kiss my butt. But but I feel like that subgenre and stuff, like I said, there's the brilliant vigilante, which I still think is as much as I love his. As much as I love Maniac Cop and all his other films, I feel like, Old Man Brain.
The director.
Lustig, thank you, who is one of my favorites and who I met, and he was a great dude. Everybody wanted to talk to him about his horror stuff. I just wanted to talk to him about Vigilante and Robert Forster. But that's a great movie. The first Exterminator, I feel like, is a solid movie. Like, I love Exterminator too, but I think the first one's like a little bit more. The second one goes full balls into what it's.
Exterminator's become really hard to find, by the way. I actually started to watch Exterminator again recently on YouTube because it's not streaming anywhere else, and then that got pulled for copyright. So there's no way. buy DVDs, buy Blu-rays. I don't care what format you have to buy these movies on. They're starting to disappear already. Who's going to do?
Well, there's a problem with streaming. Yeah.
Now I have no way to watch The Exterminator.
Come over to my house, Devin. Damn, I wish we lived closer.
Sure.
But yeah, and that's the thing is, we'll someday we'll dive deep more into that. But like I said, and the thing is, listeners, I'm sure there's a million movies we didn't talk about the Kevin Costner movie, aptly titled Revenge. I mean, there's a ton of movies we didn't actually talk about.
The Crow. Sorry for anybody that we missed The Crow.
Yeah, well, I feel like that too. We'll get to that eventually, though. The pre-Marvel universe, the pre-Marvel Cinematic Universe, a wave of superhero action films, because they did have that had its time, and or just comic book adaptation films. But yeah, there's a ton we could talk about, because again, revenge is such an element. Even if it's not the driving plot point in film, it's always going to be somewhere in that plot.
Exactly,
or somewhere, in films. It's
Upgrade was a good recent one too for sci-fi fans.
I didn't see it.
Upgrade. You would like Upgrade.
My buddy Derek said he really liked it, so it's on the list.
It won't blow your mind, but you'll chuckle. You'll definitely chuckle. And if you're into good sci-fi, in fact, Upgrade was the reason why RoboCop came up as would it be a revenge movie last time. Upgrade made me think of RoboCop.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Well, Devin, I feel like we always have really great conversations, but one of my favorite things is now my little film class, because now I got to see the High Plains Drifter, and then what was the name of the Raquel Welch one?
Hanny Calder.
Calder.
Yeah, I can spell it for you.
Let me see if I got it. Spell it for me, and I'll see if I got it right.
Her first name is Hannie, and then the last name is Calder, Caulder.
Like the famous artist Calder, who made the moguls. Cool. Yeah, I'm going to check both of those out.
Yeah, there's so many that we've missed. I knew we weren't going to have enough time, but just to kind of, The Revenant, Leonardo DiCaprio won an Oscar for a revenge movie, basically.
See, and it's funny, I don't know anything about. I saw it come up. The only thing I know about it has a bear in it. I literally
best
don't know
bear attack in a movie ever. I'll give it that. But yeah, even Conan the Barbarian is a revenge movie if you want to get technical with it. Dead Man's Shoes, a brilliant British revenge film.
We talked about that in the first episode, right?
No, we never got to Dead Man's Shoes. We texted about it, you and I did. But we never got a chance to talk about it. It is really a weird little movie. Very indie. Like, it would surprise me if that movie cost more than like $5,000 to make.
12 pounds. Yes. 12 pounds euro.
And then there's so many great 70s ones. White Lightning is with Burt Reynolds is a revenge movie. Memento, not 70s, but Memento by Christopher Nolan.
Here's an, and I know this is going to get me a lot of heat with our listeners, but I have an unspoken rule that if we never talk about Christopher Nolan movies, I won't shed a tear.
Okay, I'm on board with that. I actually think he's incredibly overrated.
I do too. I feel like I just had this conversation on a different podcast. Exactly, and everybody loves him, but I feel like he makes good movies that people think are brilliant, and they're not brilliant. Like he makes popcorn. He does it. He makes movies for adults, but they're still popcorn movies. They're not like everybody's like, oh, he's the second coming of Kubrick. No, he's not. No, he's not.
Kubrick wasn't even the first coming of
Kubrick. That's right.
Stanley Kubrick was a brilliant director. I love his movies, some of them more than others. Some of his movies I consider absolute essentials. He's a genius. He's capable of perfection. And he's at the same time probably the single most overrated director that ever lived.
I can see that, honestly. I can see that.
He's not a god,
You're not
folks.
making me upset.
Yeah, he's not a god, and I'm just going to say it. The second half of Full Metal Jacket is practically unwatchable.
Dude, I've said that exact same thing. I literally said that exact same thing. Once it leaves the training, like boot camp, I don't give a shit. I don't care. And the rest of it is...
I'll take you one further. I'm still trying to figure out what the fucking point of A Clockwork Orange is. Another one, I appreciate it. I've seen it theatrically several times. It's an interesting movie. Visually, it's fantastic. I don't think that Kubrick with me, I want to talk about Strangelove and The Shining. Outside of that, everything else is kind of technical awards in my mind.
I do like Barry Lyndon. I do like Barry Lyndon a lot. I remember not liking it that much when I saw it on my own, but then I think we watched it. I think I forget. One day we were all watching movies. One of the many.
Yeah.
We rewatched it. I think it was the Criterion release. And I was like, fuck, I actually really do like this movie. It's long.
I appreciate it. I definitely appreciate it. Yeah. The stuff he does with the lighting in that movie is just astounding. So yes, I completely agree. Stanley Kubrick is incredibly brilliant. He is not a god. No, and neither is Christopher Nolan.
Let's clarify those specifically. Christopher Nolan, besides being kind of a fucking windbag, is also not a genius. He's made some good movies. The end. That's as far as I'll take Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
He's made some very flawed good movies,
but there is one more.
Just so we're all clear.
Oh, what do we need to be clear on? Well, there's one more.
No more bagging on. No more bagging on Christopher Nolan. I think we've alienated a part of our audience enough.
We still love you. Don't leave us for saying these things. We are cinematically blaspheming here. It's how I feel. It's how I feel. Anytime you show me a Christopher Nolan movie, I'm wondering why I'm not watching Rolling Thunder. So,
same.
There is one more though that I think we will kick ourselves if we don't mention it because it's so contemporary and it's one that we can recommend to people, and that is Nicolas Cage and Mandy. I think that might be a good fiery finale.
I thought we talked about that. Didn't we already talk about this?
We didn't even mention Mandy. We have to talk about Mandy.
Maybe did we talk about it offline? Because I know we talked about it. We must have been texting about it.
How could we not have talked about Mandy at some point? I'm sure we've talked about it at some point.
I also did. I might have just talked about it on a different podcast too. That's sort of the problem of.
Poor James is on a podcast loop. It just, I don't know how you get time to do anything else. But I will thank you for it because all the times that I'm not sitting here talking to you, I get to still enjoy hearing you talk about movies to someone else. And I love it personally.
I'm glad somebody does. But yes, Mandy's brilliant. I just learned something about that though recently. I did not realize that that Cosmatos, the director, is the son of the Cosmatos that directed Cobra. So
and Tombstone.
Yeah, well, of course, but I mean, I'm talking about his good movie. No, I was kidding. I love Tombstone. Tombstone's brilliant. And definitely, probably for most people, the better of the two movies. In fact, let's be honest, Cobra was a Stallone. Cosmatos was there just to basically do what Stallone told him to do.
He makes me curious that George Cosmatos is the father, who's best known for Cobra, Rambo: First Blood Part 2, and Tombstone. No disrespect against Cosmatos. I'm sure he's extremely talented and was a nice guy. But you're right. There are no movies that are more known for their lead stars hijacking the director's chair. Because Kurt Russell has confessed to basically directing Tombstone as well. And Stallone definitely directed Cobra.
Yeah, without a doubt. If any documentary you'll see on Cobra is basically people saying Cosmatos was just yelling at people while Stallone told him what to do.
But his son, though, whose
first feature, Beyond the Black Rainbow, is a great movie. It is a good movie. It's not as entertaining. It's not as fun. It's definitely a little slow. Its pacing has some issues, but it's one of the most interesting looking movies, especially as a debut movie. It's fantastic. The soundtrack is great, but it's psychedelic and slow, but it's definitely pulling in all these homages from the 70s. But Mandy is a heavy metal album cover, psychedelic nightmare pop violence. It's the crazy.
All you can do is just throw out words to describe it. And at the end of the day, Nicolas Cage at his best. Nicolas Cage actually had a screaming coach on this movie to help him scream more effectively. He hardly has any character at all, but he doesn't need one. It's not that kind of a movie. But he's just kind of a working class dude who lives off with his girlfriend Mandy, love of his life.
He's a lumberjack.
He's lumberjack. That's right. He's a lumberjack, and they live in this beautiful log cabin that makes me incredibly jealous to look at it.
Same.
And they live this wonderful life of watching TV and talking about comic books and basically exactly how I would expect Nicolas Cage's day to go. In fact, are we sure Nicolas Cage isn't a lumberjack on most days?
Exactly.
But their house, they get home invaded by like a weird religious cult that has definitely like a Manson family vibe.
Yeah.
And they get together, they get tortured, and she gets torched, and he loses Mandy to this creep, and he goes into a vengeance rage that is unrivaled by any other movie I've ever seen. He just accepts, like, okay, now I've got to go kill these people. And it's so beautifully shot, and it's so psychedelically shot. I mean, I absolutely hate describing anything as trippy because it gives me these like horrible flashbacks to people I used to hang out with in the 90s who thought everything was trippy, dude. It was so trippy, bro. Yeah. But the adjective applies. This is a really trippy movie where he starts to plan for his revenge against this group, and the whole time you don't know whether he's unraveling, his mind is unraveling, or like what. There's supernatural elements. Basically take everything that's cool in the world, throw it in a blender, and you end up with this like Nicolas Cage smoothie. That's
exactly.
It's got chainsaw jousting, and it's got to have like I would like to know the count of how many gallons of blood they use in the movie. It rivals Evil Dead 2 in terms of how much things bleed, including inanimate objects, and it's. I don't know how else can you describe Mandy. Crazy. Am I even coming close to describing Mandy here? Because I don't know how else to do it.
One of the big plot points is that for whatever reason he decides he has to craft his own battle axe, or this crazy shaped axe. And
it's so much more personal because he forges his own battle axe.
Exactly, which is like this. It's bananas. But yeah, one of my favorite elements is that there's this like the Children of the New Dawn, which is like basically the cult that Linus Roach, who plays Jeremiah Sen, the villain in this, is so great in that role.
He was awesome.
He's so not again a TV actor that you wouldn't expect in a role like that, but he goes whole hog in that role. In fact, he shows his whole hog in that role.
I don't think you can refer to it as a hog, though. I think that's part of the point.
Yeah, well, that's true.
This whole thing, the whole reason Mandy gets killed is because she laughs.
Exactly. Yes, that's very true. Yep. But there's this thing there's a group of like demonic bikers called the Black Skulls that are basically demons, I guess. I don't even know how you describe them. They're definitely but they're watching porn and throwing people down holes, and it's the fucking weirdest. But yeah, my only problem with it is the third act has I won't ruin it for anybody, but it's like, I don't know, there's no like, most movies, I don't want to ruin anything for anybody. It's a minor complaint. It's definitely worth the price of admission. I guarantee you, the Cheddar Goblin alone is worth the price of admission.
Cheddar Goblin, great. The Cheddar Goblin commercial, by the way, was directed by Casper Kelly, the mastermind behind Too Many Cooks. Anybody's a fan of Too Many Cooks on Adult Swim, which please,
and if you watch it,
nothing else, watch Mandy and watch Too Many Cooks. These are two of the greatest things to come out in the last 5 years from anybody 100%. Creatively.
I feel like this is the perfect last one to mention because it's definitely the most fun, like bananas and the most original and like
there's nowhere else to go from here.
No, exactly. And I just have to shout out to my favorite scene in the whole movie is when he goes to see the chemist, played by the amazing Richard Brake, who was who got his most notoriety currently because he was on an episode of The Mandalorian, the third to last episode, where he played an evil admiral, I believe, of the Empire. But he's so great in that role. There's a tiger that they let. It's just
because of course there's a tiger.
Great. Yeah, there's just a tiger.
What do we need for this movie? There's something missing. I know, it's a fucking tiger.
Tiger. A beautiful kitty cat. So yeah, definitely. If you haven't seen Mandy and you like fun movies, again, don't
mind a lot of blood.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like a cartoon, but like a evil, psychedelic, bizarre Nicolas Cage cartoon. But yeah, it's great. In fact, I may rewatch it tonight.
I might take a look too. That was one of my few splurges on Black Friday. I don't have a lot of money this year, but I did find Mandy for $5, so it's out there. Get Mandy. And I want to point out real quick too, I did splurge on something from Vinegar Syndrome. Make sure that if you are able to buy things for people for Christmas this year, or if you're buying things for yourself, try to buy directly from the vendor if you get the chance. Vinegar Syndrome, Blue Underground, Shout Factory, they all have their own websites. pick up some of these movies on disc, and especially let them know you want this stuff on 4K.
See, I'm not a big, to me, the 2K trend, like, I don't know, I feel like I will I'm sure eventually I will be like, 4K is the highest you can go. I mean, there's really, you can't, it's like, it's the highest resolution. I mean, you can do 8K, but there's a whole, like.
Modern movies can be done 8K, but if you remaster old movies into 8K, you're going to end up, I mean, you can already see the zipper on the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and
exactly.
You couldn't when it was originally made.
Well, from what I understand, like, most films, like, if you go into, like, films that weren't originally shot digitally, like, if you go to 8K, like, it's really not even, it literally can't, you can't store enough information. Anyways, I don't know. I'm not a expert, but I read this whole article about 4K versus 8K, and will 4K be the last of the real, like, physical media? Because, you know, at this for old films, like I said, new releases. But either way, to me, you know, it's weird because a lot of these movies, like you said, like, you know, rewatching a movie, like, just trying to throw a random movie out there, like, I have so many in my brain I can't narrow it down to one. But, like, you know, a movie like Street Trash, you know, seeing that movie, like, in the highest possible definition, I don't think it's doing that movie any favors, honestly. Like, it's like, but I'll still watch. But anyways, but yeah, I definitely support physical media. Definitely support, you know, these physical media companies who, for a lot of these companies, it's a labor of love. Like, they're literally doing this because they themselves are like Severin Films, Arrow, you know, the British company Arrow, who does a lot of American releases. The stuff they release is painstakingly give you, even though the physical release itself, usually you get a flip cover. They really are, most of these companies, it's a labor of love because they are film fans.
Yeah.
You know,
even the Criterion collection, it may be kind of the king of the mountain, but it's still very much an independent, small company.
Yeah, and Criterion, they're also, I mean, they're restoring and archiving, you know, amazing movies. Like, if usually with Criterion, it's like, if Criterion put it out, it's going to be worth a viewing because it's, you know, they're so, for a wider audience. To me, like, everything Vinegar Syndrome puts out is also just as valuable, yes, but maybe not to everybody.
Well, Vinegar Syndrome is sending me my 4K of Beastmaster. It was just shipped today.
That's right.
So to give you an idea, but
which I've heard is the best release of the year. So that yeah. But yeah, let's end there, I guess. But Devin, as always, it's always fun, and I'm going to go watch a few movies tonight. Before we close out, First, I want to say, because I don't know if we're recording in, I hope you have a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays. Hopefully we can record before, at least by the New Year, but hopefully maybe before Christmas. But just want to make sure that I wish you and yours Merry Christmas, and to our listeners, Happy Holidays as well.
To your family and to all of our listeners' families, and to all of our listeners who have no family, and to all of your dogs and cats. Merry Christmas to everybody. And I hope we'll be back before the New Year, because I'm still hoping to do some time traveling. I've already started doing some research on the time travel episode, if you're still down.
I'm always down to watch some time travel movies.
All right, sweet. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. I know this was a rather interesting. I really enjoyed this discussion. I now know what a revenge movie conversation can sound like in 2020, which was my initial question when we started this. I didn't know how this was going to go and how PC we were going to get, or whether we were going to end up stuttering over all these movies instead of actually speaking eloquently about them. But I think we did a pretty good job. Let us know, please, in the comments. You can find us on Facebook, and you can find us on Twitter, and you can find us on Instagram. You can find us anywhere the podcasts are found, whether you're on Spotify or we are on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, just about everywhere. So please do listen to our back episodes. Let us know what you think on the social media. And we're looking to do some upgrades as the new year gets in, and we'll let you know as those start to occur. I would like to have a website at some point, and James and I have talked about getting some merch for some of the movies that we talk about.
Everybody likes merch, right?
I like merch. I'm a big fan of merch. I don't think my wife likes merch, but that's only because I like merch and I spend our money on it.
That's right. I know that struggle.
I love my wife.
I'm sure our listeners do too.
And I'm so glad she loves me.
That's right. Gotta make sure that's put out there. But yeah, Devin, thank you once again for a fascinating and fulfilling conversation. And I bid you adieu.
Likewise. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Peace.